Welcome to my channel, Conversations with Dr. Sue. I'm Dr. Susan Musicanth, counseling psychologist and author. And today we're going to be examining the subject of ADHD, attention deficit disorder. And we're very fortunate to have Mandy Katz with us. Mandy is a life coach, a school counselor, and an iHart facilitator. And she's going to share her story of having attention deficit disorder and recognizing attention deficit disorder in the little children and the bigger children that she sees on a day-to-day basis. What my hope is that people in the audience will recognize parts of her story and relate to them and realize if they perhaps are struggling with attention deficit disorder, as it's called ADHD. I personally am quite sure that I've had ADHD through the years, and it's such a help when you don't feel alone and you realize that there is something that you can do, whether it be via medication or behavior changes or just acknowledgement that this is what I'm struggling with and these are the behaviors that I need to change. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you for agreeing to tell us your story about ADHD, and is it okay if I guide you?
Yes, please, because as you know about ADHD, we do need to be brought back on track fairly often, so feel free.
All right, so what I would ask you is to tell us your story about how you are now in terms of ADHD, how it feels, what you do about it, and then go back to the beginning. Cast your mind back to your childhood, your time at school, when you knew that there was perhaps something wrong, and how you link that to now, when I think that you've seen this play out with the little children, where you're the school counselor and you've seen little children behaving in a certain way and where they get diagnosed with attention deficit disorder.
Where I am now is I do take medication.
Can I ask you what you take?
Yeah, I'm taking Concerta.
Right.
Taking 36 milligrams a day. And that has a massive impact on so many areas.
Has it been a game changer for you? Realizing that you have an issue with attention deficit and you're being treated for attention deficit. Has it been a game changer for you in your life, in your mind?
So I think even when I started investigating whether I do have ADHD, it wasn't like I was 100% certain. It seemed quite likely.
Okay.
The game-changing piece I think that you're talking to is when I started taking medication. That was a night and day experience.
So that was when
within
you could
24 hours.
Oh wow!
I knew that this
Wow.
has been a piece of my life forever, and that within 24 hours I could say things will be different. So many things will be different from this point onwards. It was as though I picked up that superpower cape.
Wow.
I put on my Superman cape and entered the world. It was the difference of thinking about something and doing something.
You took action.
I actually got started on something.
Yes.
I didn't dither and plan, and it wasn't all happening in the background and a nice idea and that's where it ended. It was the difference between having an idea, thinking about it, and then actually doing it. And then not stopping in the middle of it and going down a rabbit hole
the end
of any other piece that comes my way that seems, oh, this looks interesting, or that looks interesting, that would take me down another rabbit hole. It was staying with the project in mind, staying with whatever it was that I wanted to do, and seeing it through till the end. And that seeing it through till the end in such an efficient, effective way it's a major dopamine piece that I had been missing for most of my life. Because what happens when you're not on medication is that you can plan, you can start something eventually. You might not finish it. You certainly won't finish it the way you want to finish it. And with that comes judgment, self-judgment.
And confidence,
criticism, and
self-criticism, and lower confidence.
Yes.
I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure and I can't finish anything.
Yes. I can't start it, I can't finish it, I can't do it the way that I want to do it. I'm sure I could do it better. Why am I slacking off already?
Is it? I know that I'm quite bright, but I'm not able to actualize my potential. Is that how it feels, or different?
I would say on a really good day.
Okay.
On a really good day, you can go, in spite of what my teachers have told me, in spite of what my family have suggested, I think I can do this. And then comes well, obviously you can't do it because you haven't done it.
Yes.
And what makes you think you could do it? So you engage in a whole internal conversation with yourself, even on a good day.
How long ago did you get an inkling and took action with your inkling that maybe this is something that I need to explore further?
Actually, I think without the hyperactivity piece,
yes,
I would have got there so much sooner. My mind
is
hyperactive. It's moving, it's going in every direction. But physically, I was never somebody who was swinging from the rafters and behaving inappropriately, or that wasn't the piece. My mouth went. I mean, at school, I was often in trouble for talking and interrupting and things like that, but not excessively. And I don't have the need to keep moving. I don't have a...
Okay, it's quite interesting because the current research that I've seen talks about women get misdiagnosed because that piece of hyperactivity is missing. So they get misdiagnosed because of that. It doesn't come to the fore like it does with boys and men. They're more easily diagnosed because of the hyperactivity.
So I was very aware of not staying present to the whole lecture.
Yes.
The whole story, the whole explanation.
Right.
I would sort of dip in and out of it. Then I'd notice something else happening around there, or I'd be listening to somebody at the back of the class, or I would just get interested in something else, and then something would bring me back. So I was aware of missing chunks and not connecting that dot.
Take us back to you at school.
I loved school, actually.
Did you love the academics? Did you love learning?
I loved all of it, but the academics in junior school is very much of a doing thing, a creative experience. You're in it, it's experiential, and I loved that. But when I got to sort of high school years, then it became...
grade?
I would say grade 7, grade 8.
Okay.
Where I felt there was an expectation to do well because I had done well until then. And I was terrified of that expectation because something inside of me knew that I was faking it.
Did you feel like an imposter?
Complete imposter. I did not want to be counted amongst kids who were capable, kids who were, I didn't want to be considered in that group of students, because it didn't feel like that was me.
There was something missing.
There was something missing. I felt like I was faking it, and that it would come out. It would be revealed.
Okay.
And I didn't know what that was. What was going to be revealed? I didn't really know, but I knew it was something to be ashamed of. You don't want it to be revealed.
So you would have been 12, 13, 14-ish when that started.
Probably 14, 15, and then...
Okay.
Yeah.
As hormones were kicking in, and as work was becoming more pressured.
And then it was almost a conscious decision to really not show up academically, to really just to take on a little bit of more of a rebellious persona.
How did you act out? How did you do that?
So I did very little studying. I didn't get involved in things that maybe I would have enjoyed, maybe I wouldn't have. I held back.
Like a debating society?
Anything like, oh, for sure.
Not.
Anything like that I would have held back from. Mostly it was the studying and not wanting to be in the limelight of anything.
And joking around a bit.
A little bit of joking around.
Chatting.
Oh, that I couldn't help. That actually wasn't conscious, but it was...
what you did.
It's what got me through the day. It was like, I wasn't going to invest myself in the academics. I was just going to chat with somebody.
What feedback did you get from your system? What feedback did you get from parents, from school, from friends?
If Mandy didn't talk so much, if Mandy didn't chat so much, she's
written into your report.
Yeah, there's potential. She doesn't apply herself.
Mandy could do better if she didn't talk so much. She applied herself. And what did you do with that?
Nothing. I took it on as that is who I am. Okay. It became a part of an identity of, I'm not academic and I'm not a good student, and
it is what it is.
Yeah, this is just, 12 years in a system. You see yourself as the system sees you.
One of your coping mechanisms was humor, and is up until today. You have a wonderful sense of humor. So, how did you go on? How did you progress at school?
So I opted out. I really didn't see myself as somebody who was ever really going to do anything fantastic. I didn't really know what to do after school. I did go to university. I didn't apply myself. And then I went overseas. I was sort of just waiting to get out of a system. And so if I could tick the boxes of school and study and then move away from it as quickly as possible. That the systems were not a place from where I felt like I could thrive.
Some years later, you were referred to me as a client and presented this lovely person carefully first, with reservation. We limped towards each other to get to know each other until we could relax some years later. You presented with symptoms of anxiety, depression through the years, but we didn't talk specifically about attention deficit. I missed it. As a counseling psychologist, I loved working with you, and I was excited when you talked about, I really want to get my master's degree. And my way is to nudge and push a bit. And I didn't really understand the lower confidence that you offered in my rooms. It didn't fit, Mandy. You felt smart and sharp and sometimes a little bit ditzy. You were forgetful sometimes, but I never linked the dots to each other.
Yeah.
It didn't strike me as, I wonder if she has an attention deficit disorder. Not once. When you came to me later and you said, you know, I've been working with little children who've been diagnosed with attention deficit. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that's the missing piece. First, for me to backtrack, so you did your master's and you finished your master's and we celebrated together.
Yeah.
It was so good and your confidence went up with, and I can do it.
Yeah.
But it was after that you saw stuff in these little children. I'm not sure exactly what the ages were of these kids that were getting diagnosed. Do you remember?
It's an interesting question, that, because it would be quite a range of ages. Sometimes you could tell, certainly if there's a hyperactive piece, one becomes curious about it quite young.
Like boys mainly?
It could be girls as well. Could be girls as well.
Right.
That's one piece of it. The other piece would be when they started grade 1, and grade R, you were already quite curious about how kids were working. What was there?
Right.
Are they getting started? Are they following through? Are they finishing? How many times does the teacher have to repeat the instruction for a particular child? Once they understand it, are they then off and running and able to complete it from beginning to, do they need another reminder? Do they need to be brought back? And so those are the pieces that one becomes curious about when it presents in a child. And also always you want to have a conversation with the parents. What are they seeing at home? What are the grandparents seeing? How are they with their siblings? Because it's pervasive, you know, one would need to see it everywhere.
In the whole system.
Yes, not just in a schooling system where perhaps the chair isn't comfortable, or, you know, there are other things that one gets curious about as well. Is there a sensory element to it?
Can they enjoy hug, touch, or do they have a sensory?
Yes, is there something in the fabric that is irritating them and they can't sit still? Or are they overly aware of the lighting in the class or the sounds from behind? So movement doesn't always suggest, you know, it's not the only piece that we look at for ADHD, which is often an assumption that people make. If a child moves a lot, well, then they're ADHD, but there are many things that it could be.
So how long were you with these kids of various ages before you said, ping pong, this might be me too?
I would say about a year.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more, because you also see the emotional side of it. So what is it getting in the way of for kids? Is it getting in the way of their friendships because they shoot from the hip?
Okay. Is that what you found with these particular kids?
Yes,
they talk straight.
A lot of kids, they're going to say whatever's in their mind, and how is that going to impact the relationship that they're trying to establish with another child? Or their behavior, they're starting to play a game that they then just get up and move away from. And it impacts the connection. So kids who are struggling a little bit with relationship connection,
that too.
It can also be a part of it.
I remember when I was assessing children, and we would go as professionals and talk with the parents, and the parents often said, but he's not like that at home. We can give him a whole box of Lego and he'll put together the box without being distracted at all. And we would say it's not about playing with something or engaging in an activity that he loves. He will be completely focused. It's something that I understand happens with ADHD kids and adults.
I think people think that you can't focus on anything.
Yes.
That is the assumption. Well, which is not true. You can hyper-focus on certain things.
That's what I also wanted to ask you about, if you felt that for yourself.
Yes.
Because I felt that for myself. If I'm interested in something, I hyper-focus. And if I'm not interested, it's chopped liver.
So I think right through my master's degree, that was the piece that kept me going.
I wondered.
It was interesting for me, and my hyper-focus was completely into that. If you had asked me, also the way that I did my master's, but if I had, during COVID, everything was online.
Right.
And so that was a better way for me to study. Whereas if I'd had to sit in lectures where some lecturers grabbed my attention and others didn't, and then there was a piece of work that would be added on at the end of a certain lecture, I'm not sure I would have hung in right until the end.
So there might be, for little kids and bigger kids and adults, and I think for myself as well, the studying by correspondence, and then later in my master's we were a very small group. I was hyper-focused. I'm quite sure, I haven't had a diagnosis yet, but I'm quite sure that I have an attention deficit. I remember moving from the back of the class for those 2 years to the front of the class and not even realizing that I had moved. The class were laughing at me, as were the lecturers. I was so glued on for those 2 years that, well, in fact, for 13 years.
Yes.
But something else, I couldn't remember my own name.
No, other things will fall by the wayside, for sure, for sure. And that was the pleasure of studying through COVID, was that really there was nowhere else that I needed to be.
What do you think is the downside of a kid or an adult being super focused, perhaps over focused? Because I've heard about it and read about it, not necessarily in a positive way.
So for me, it was a positive experience,
me too.
because I had the freedom to take my focus where I wanted to take it in a school system or any system. The downside is really that the system can't accommodate that. And it really does depend how much agency you have over your life when you start to celebrate ADHD, because as a child, it's very hard to celebrate. In fact, you're more in trouble than not. Your confidence is definitely going to be lower than it could have been. You will discover the value and your gifts in the world only after school, if you are robust enough to do so.
Or somebody says to you, you can. And see what your interest is. I remember you saying, I don't know what I should be doing. I don't know which direction to take.
So for me, I know for sure, every couple of years, I go, okay, that's enough of that. And let me find something else to do, because
I'm getting bored.
I'm getting bored. And it's not because I'm an expert in what I'm doing that I'm feeling it's time to try something else. Not at all. It gets in the way of me becoming an expert in anything. But it's a feeling of boredom and restlessness that drives me to something else. Now that I have an understanding of it, I'm aware of it, I can work with that, I'm an adult, I can be forgiving of it, I can do something about it or with it if I want to. As a child, you don't necessarily understand what that is.
No.
What is that about? Why are my friends able to study for matric, endlessly and endlessly? And of course they would. They know what they want to do after school, and it requires getting good marks. For me, it was, well, you're not going to get good marks. And so what's the point of thinking about after school? There's no point of thinking about that because you're not going to do well. So, and you would never be able to sit and study. So take that whole piece of possibility off the table. And that's the piece where it's really worth knowing if your child does have ADHD, so that you can parent it in a completely different way.
So those kids who are not recognized often fall through the cracks. I remember coming first and second in my class until grade 4. And then I shifted schools. And then I started floundering a bit and through high school and failing a lot. And had somebody noticed, funnily enough, I was assessed as the A stream, the university stream, and yet I was failing badly. There was something wrong and something missing.
So with the high school kids, we're always aware that by the time they're there, they've already started masking quite a lot of the ADHD symptoms. So the kids who are, grade 6 and 7, those kids are generally still quite enthusiastic.
Yes.
But then there are kids who are not. And we want to know why they aren't enthusiastic. Or they're playing around or fooling about just a little bit too much. Or we're seeing that, as you expressed now, there's a gap between what they seem to be capable of doing and what they actually are producing. Or we notice that they're doing really, really well in certain pieces of certain subjects, but not in the rest of that subject or in other subjects. So the hyperfocus comes into play.
Is that where a kid that we would have assessed has perhaps a very high verbal intelligence, the group of verbal intelligence scores are significantly higher than the non-verbal scores? There's a significant difference, and that makes one think there's something going on.
So we want to get curious about what is it. I mean, it could be any number of things. It could be something's happening at home, and it isn't about ADHD. So there's many things it could be, but we also have to be aware that if they were doing okay in junior school,
what's happened,
and they're not doing okay now, and there's nothing going on at home that's out of the ordinary or different, then we want to understand why. If there is a suspicion that there's an avoidance of work through play or joking, or
a defensiveness.
Defensive, or if their desk is a complete disaster, there's no organization.
Would you look also at handwriting that's all over the place?
Yes, a level of disorganization, and it could come in many places. It could be that they don't take their homework home, or they don't bring their homework back with them. It could be the handwriting. It could be the state of their desks. It could.
An interesting thing that we used to notice was when the handwriting was illegible, and then they would take something those days was Ritalin, and the handwriting became absolutely beautiful. It was quite amazing, the difference.
So that also is, I guess it depends on the age. Is it an OT thing, or is it a concentration thing? Are they losing focus in the middle of writing?
So what is the impact of devices, screens on attention deficit in children, with adults? What have you noticed yourself?
There are two pieces to that. You often hear parents going, my child doesn't have ADHD, it's just that they spend so much time gaming and on screens and everything, that's what's getting in their way of their focus. And what we find actually is that it's the other way around, that a child who does have a focus issue will be drawn to gaming, will be drawn to social media, will be drawn to this endless scrolling because it's giving them that dopamine hit.
Okay.
I find something interesting, or I've managed to overtake that, you know, in whatever the race is.
Super focus and over focus.
The super focus, the over focus, and then there's success in the game, or there's success. I've managed to find something. Shopping online, I found exactly what I was looking for, and so I get that little rush. Right. And so it's often the other way round. But having said that, the way that we no longer stay in the moment of thought, and it's encouraged by devices to such an extent to not stay in the moment of thought. Even somebody who is not ADHD today has more challenges trying to stay focused on things that they love than, when I was growing up, for example, because I've got my phone or device sitting right here, pinging away. I know it's full of interesting, what am I missing out on? So even if I'm not ADHD, that's a massive pull. And there is hyper-focus in that.
Yes.
So yes. I want more. For example, if I get distracted by a beautiful meal that I see prepared on Instagram, and somebody might go, oh, that's an incredible photograph. Right. I want to understand the photography behind that. Right. And they'll go down that path. Yes. Somebody else might go, oh, I'm such a foodie. I love beautifully presented food.
And I want to start
making going down
dish.
That rabbit hole. So it's not necessarily the same thing that's going to pull us into hyperfocus. It really has to do with what my interests are. And so for somebody who doesn't have ADHD, that is challenging enough.
Yes, sure.
In my day, I want to be productive. I've got a million things that I need to be present to, and that is still happening. If I am ADHD, that is pushing a boulder up a hill all the time. I have to keep disconnecting from that piece. So the other piece of ADHD and screens that is an important thing to know is that, especially for little kids, and actually you'll see it in adults as well, a complete mood change when we do eventually get off of our devices. Because we've been pulled into gaming for so long or searching for something for so long, there's almost like an overwhelm of dopamine. It's now, what are we're drenched in it.
You're talking about addiction.
And when we come out of that, how do we relate to the world around us?
There's a withdrawal.
There's a withdrawal. So we might be aggressive, we might be withdrawn, we actually, people ask us questions, everything is fine and okay. We can't become monosyllabalistic, if there is such a word.
Masked.
I'm a mess. I'm in a fog and I can't find my way back to connect with the real world. And I'll just add one more piece to that. It's why, or just another reason why, free play for children is so important. When a child can play freely outside with their bodies and whatever is out there, the tree, the swings, another child, maybe they know the other child or maybe they don't, they're still getting the dopamine rush from engagement and play and running around and joy, but they don't walk away from that engagement with aggression, with a fog, with a difficulty of transitioning back to connecting.
It's a great point, and it's a point that could well apply to adults. With and without attention deficit. Mm-hmm. It's something that we recommend as a stress manager for entrepreneurs and for everybody, but can so specifically relate to adults with attention deficit disorder. Switch off the screens, leave them behind on a regular basis, and go and reset. And where do you go? Into nature. Go into nature, like you said, swim. Or go into nature where there's trees and water and nature and no Wi-Fi or fiber. It's unbelievable
how nutritious that is for the soul, and how it can just settle something where the person is not able to be still enough to do meditation or mindfulness. In their activities in nature, they can go and walk or run, be they adults or children, or it sounds like often adults have children with attention deficit disorder. And maybe they can go and play, kick a ball, play, swim, and all the generations are calming down. So in a nutshell is notice the kids who start dropping the ball. They might be in preschool where you notice perhaps an unusual level of hyperactivity. Some would say more in boys than girls, but you're saying maybe both.
Maybe both.
Maybe forgetful, maybe leaving stuff behind on a basic level. Maybe social disorganization, or friends, the people in their group don't want to play with them. They might be a bit boisterous. And later, they stop achieving as they should be. I hate the word achieving.
I think it's about a conscientiousness that
and
motivation that we naturally have. And children, like adults, we naturally are that way. So what is getting in the way of that?
So somebody needs to be looking. And perhaps somebody who struggled at school, later on at school, like you, like me, who sees a child that you're a counselor, you're seeing children, you can talk to parents, you can talk to the other teachers. I'll see grandchildren. I'll notice other things. And is there something happening? It sounds like, is this worth exploring further? Because often one doesn't know, am I on the right track or not? But it's worth exploring further.
Certainly the junior school time it's not a time to be critical.
No.
It's a time to be curious.
I like the word curious.
What am I seeing in this child?
Yes.
And, sometimes it's about the emotions that are so overwhelming and they can't make sense of them, or they can't calm down from them, or they're acting very quickly from a point of overwhelm. And that's also something to be curious about, even though it's really quite natural in the early childhood years. That to a certain extent, it is absolutely normal. And then at some point, it's not that to such an extent, or the degree is worth being curious about.
So, Mandy, what should we as adults who perhaps have had our own attention deficit issues, what do you think would be a nutshell for us to notice with kids?
It's the school readiness stage, when we become aware that a child is going to need to sit at a desk for a period of time, doing work in their minds, making sense of questions, answering,
and taking a project to the end.
To the end, starting and finish, working with other kids collaboratively. And we just pay attention loosely to how they're managing with all of that.
Let's talk about an adult who realizes that there's something wrong and potentially has ADHD.
So I think by the time you're adult, it really does depend on you. It's, what am I doing in my life?
What do I want to do?
What would I like to be doing? What have I not done that I might have done? And unfortunately, I think a lot of adults start to see themselves as less capable, less motivated, less driven. Either they start to see that side of themselves from a point of sort of not having confidence from school, or you actually get the complete opposite as well, where you get people who are so full of ideas, so full of insights, so full of energy, that they're going to find something that they can put all of that into in a way that brings them success. And so depending where you fall on your self-assessment, I guess, you either will want to have a diagnosis and start working with that, or it will mean nothing at all in your life. If I wake up and I'm totally aware of the fact that I can sell anything to anybody, and that's what I've done through school. I didn't pass anything, I didn't achieve anything, but I was that person who could literally get others to respond in a certain way.
Yes.
I could get them to follow me. I could get them to be excited about something I was doing. I could get them to buy into an idea that I had. Well, I would be living out a superpower of ADHD.
So,
I would not be feeling like I can't do anything and I've got nothing to contribute.
Mandy, are you talking hypothetically, or that was who you were at school?
That was not my story.
Okay, okay.
I'm saying that is often the story of people who are ADHD and were not diagnosed and then went on to do incredible things.
Well, you're talking about the pool of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked a lot with entrepreneurs, and you're describing the entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. If one sits in a group of hundreds of entrepreneurs, they're telling that story.
And what they've done somewhere along the line is they've realized that organization is not their strength.
Yes.
So they don't come at it from a point of judgment. They just come at it as a point of acceptance. Well, that isn't my forte. I'm much better at selling things and organizing things. So I'm going to hire a whole bunch of people to do that for me. And I'm just going to run around the town having meetings. I'm going to get on the phone and I don't even need a chair with my desk. I'm just going to walk up and down until there's a hole in my carpet, because that's how I think well, is when I'm in movement.
And I'll do deals.
And I'll do deals, or I'll go into a catering where I never need to sit still and I just need to be creative.
So we talk about a group of entrepreneurs and we talk about, I wonder how many of them do or don't know that they have an attention deficit disorder, but they're successful or less so in their business ventures. What do you think?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
So I think that there are people who genuinely are entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And what can happen along the way is that they can either be hugely successful, in which case they are marinating in dopamine. And they it's such a motivating piece that's what keeps them going back, building more, trying then another business or adding on a new idea to their existing business.
Sorry, is that addiction to beginnings, that dopamine hit?
There's a certain piece, I'm not sure that it's addiction, but I would say that dopamine is very connected to motivation.
Okay.
So for sure, I mean, if you go down an extreme point of it, you might reach an element of addiction. That's not my expertise at all. But in terms of motivation, that's the piece that gets me started.
Yes.
Is my dopamine. I've got this idea and now I'm going to start working with it. And as I move through my working with it, I'm getting another little drip of dopamine, and it keeps me staying on track. It keeps my motivation up. It keeps my enthusiasm going. And even when things get really difficult, it's okay, because I can try something else, and perhaps in that direction, I'll get a little bit of a dopamine support. What happens with people who are ADHD and who are entrepreneurs is that unless the business is feeding back success, a sense of success for them, they're not getting that drip.
Okay.
And so to stay on track with that endeavor becomes quite difficult. And one can become quite hard on oneself because you don't see the upside. It's much more difficult to see it. I lose my motivation, I lose my enthusiasm, eventually I shut down. Now maybe I'll try something else, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'm just useless. So there's a big piece of confidence and resilience that is very connected to dopamine. And if we don't have access to what it is that we need, then even if we're entrepreneurs with fabulous ideas, it's not just in the academic space. I guess that's what I want to say. Part of it is the academic space. Of course, I'm not going to be able to be focused and productive, but even in the entrepreneurial space or the creative space, if it's not enough, I don't get any feedback.
So are you, or are you not talking about the link between medication and dopamine, or not?
So with ADHD, there's medical doctors who will give you a better explanation, but we don't use our dopamine efficiently.
Okay.
And therefore we don't experience that feedback of I've got this, I've succeeded, I'm doing well. I don't get that feedback. I have to keep telling myself that. But if I don't really believe it, because I've not received that in my whole upbringing from all the systems that I've been in, I'm at a loss.
And would something like Concerta or Ritalin
feed
some of that dopamine?
Yes.
Okay.
So then I can take my medical piece of my pharmaceutical piece and I can apply it across the board, whether I'm entrepreneurial, creative, academic, all of that.
So can I also ask, besides medication and besides actually finding out, exploring and knowing this is what I'm sitting with, are there any other behavioral things that you can add to the pot that will help the adult with attention deficit?
So for adults and children, movement is key. So swimming, which also focuses your mind. Yes, you might be looking at the lane, below you, and that might be all that you're looking at, but you can't talk. And so you are in your own mind space. So swimming until you are depleted is fantastic. You'll also find for some people it is the arts, which takes you into a state of flow, and you can actually just, there's nothing wrong or right. There's nothing, art is such an open-minded.
The right side of your mind.
You're just being creative. There's no judgment involved in anything that you're producing or creating. And then, the mindful pieces, for some people it's helpful and for some people it's not, because it is so difficult.
Still. It's so still for a person with attention deficit.
Yes.
So difficult to stay.
Yes.
What about nutrition?
So nutrition is another big piece, and that's whether you're on medication or not on medication. The nutrition piece is important to know about. Sometimes when you are taking medication, you don't have the same appetite.
Right.
So, you have to be conscious of feeding yourself. And then it's what you put into your body that is enormous.
Feeds your mind.
We need our protein.
Sugar?
We need everything, but we really don't need processed foods.
So is it the ultra processed like sugar?
Yes.
And things that...
And even things like a glass of orange juice. It's too much.
Good point.
It's
good
fresh.
Point.
And it's healthy. It's too much sugar in
full of sugar.
In one go. So
rather eat the whole orange.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, rather eat the whole orange. And music is another one that is fantastic because it does take your focus. You cannot play an instrument without being immersed. Full body and mind experiences are great.
And as an adult or as a child, do you think something like baking and cooking?
Anything that a child, for sure it's creative.
Stimulating the senses.
Stimulating, and we're busy, it's full body experience. The other thing is drama.
Oh yes.
Which
just
gives you that opportunity to be somebody else.
Get out of your
A
head.
little bit.
Be somebody else on stage, and that's where dissociation is a good thing. You're not yourself, and it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Get out of yourself and play. So if we talk about an adult with ADHD, would you say that one of the ways of dealing is perhaps medication, where one can hold one's thoughts together and do a project from beginning to end? On the other hand, it may not be working for certain people, and maybe they need to recognize what is and understand their talents and understand the areas that don't blow their hair back, that don't fire them up, that they're not curious about.
So it's a big, really such a personal thing. I mean, for me, I had just finished my master's.
Yes, interesting.
And then I realized, oh my goodness, it would have been so much easier. Like what I did in 12 hours, I could have done in 3 hours.
Totally.
And I would have been far more efficient, far more kind to myself, far more compassionate with my process of study. Instead, I was, constantly felt like I had a whip over my head and I get back to it. But I wouldn't have got up every 3 minutes to feed the dog and hang out the washing. And
because you were so interested.
Yes.
Mandy, your story, I imagine and I hope that there are many hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who can recognize themselves in pieces of your story. From young to adulthood, and what you've seen with little children, and they can say to themselves, aha, a penny has dropped, and they think there's something and they want to explore it further. I think simply by telling your story, you may be not only a game changer for yourself, but for many, many, many other people. And for that, I want to say huge thank you.
Thank you, Sue.